getting into this hour, we're looking at what's happening with the climate. And we're looking at conversations that are very necessary to be had as we're getting into a very near future, literally next month. What happens? This year, there was a lot of rain. It went beyond rain and it was flooding. And the entire country essentially was inundated with copious amounts of water. And many said things should have been done. And now we are getting to the place again where we're saying it's drying up and things should be done. Two guests join us this hour as we get into that conversation. Dr. Philip Omondi is a project manager, Weather and Climate Information Services. Dr. good morning.
Morning.
As well as Dr. Masilin Gudoshava is a climate modeling expert with ICPAC. And you're going to ask me what ICPAC is, and I will tell you. Maybe she will tell you. But as we get into that, it is a regional center, but she'll give us more information about that. Dr. good morning to you.
Good morning to you too.
Karibu sana to the hot seats of the Situation Room. It is a hot topic, so let's get into it proper. And as we do that, CT is going to welcome you to the room with a proverb. Two things. As he tells us the proverb, then you can tell us what you think about it and how you interpret that.
Yes. We, for the last 3 weeks, this is the fourth week, we've been looking at countries in Africa that are landlocked. And we asked this of our guests, just to mention one landlocked country, so long as it's not Uganda, Rwanda or Burundi.
Okay, I will mention Zambia.
Very good.
There is Zimbabwe.
They kind of like had a foot in the door anyway. These are climate, environment, land people.
No, they watch the show.
Nice one.
Okay, yeah, let's go with that.
So they came prepared and said, that guy, we're going to try and ask her this question. That's we are ready for you. Z and Z, yes. We are in the Republic of Chad. The country has 200 ethnic groups. How many?
200.
Yep. And it is the 5th largest country in Africa. 20th largest nation, just by the surface area in the world. The question that will be asked by somebody, okay, so we're in Kenya and where are we? What is our number? Well, be happy, you're 23rd. There are 54 countries. You're not the smallest. The smallest is actually Seychelles. Okay? So we're not doing too badly. Now, the proverb. Arrogance burnt the chief's compound.
Arrogance burnt the chief's compound. Dr. Omondi, what do you think about that? What does it mean to you?
Arrogance burnt the chief house.
Compound.
Well, I would say if you are arrogant, you are calling for yourself problems.
Okay.
So to me, I think it means kind of like you should be someone who's willing to listen to others and take advice.
Be willing to listen and take advice, or if you're going to your own downfall if you don't.
Yes.
Chief's compound, many things happening.
Do you guys feel what I
Go ahead.
shared earlier?
Yes.
They're leaning towards your own building barriers.
Okay, Anki. So
You get it?
Okay.
Yes,
nice.
we get it. We get it.
Anki, you are justified.
Thank you.
Completely.
Yeah, completely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
She had given a descriptive, interpretation which is very similar to the one the two of you have given. And so now she's been, yes.
It's okay. You're in good company. Okay. So, let's get into this. Again, coming off the backdrop of what's been happening when we look at climate change, when we look at climate situations, when we look at the climate situation in the country, unprecedented flooding took place in this country between the months of March towards, mid-May. And then it kind of all dried up. We saw some rain then in the middle of it. And then we're getting into what is inadvertently going to be a dry spell. But before we do that, I want to start off with ICPAC. Dr. Masilin, what is ICPAC and what exactly does it do?
So ICPAC, so the name in full for those who might not be aware, is the IGAD Climate Prediction and Application Center. So it is one of the specialized institutions of IGAD. So there are quite a number and we're one of them. We are headquartered here in Kenya. We are also like a regional climate center, specialized for WMO. We are a designated center for WMO. And we provide climate services to 11 countries. So IGAD focuses on 8 countries, but we also extend our services to Rwanda, Burundi, and also Tanzania. And we focus on different aspects. So we focus on climate services, so where we are doing the monitoring and then the forecasting. And we do this for different time scales. So when there's a tropical cyclone, we also issue out warnings. And then we also issue out weekly forecasts, monthly, seasonal. And then we also have climate change information. We also have different divisions like the disaster risk management, the water, the food security and nutrition. We also have climate change. We also focus also on capacity building of our member states.
And I mean, just for purposes of clarification, IGAD is the Intergovernmental Authority on Development.
Yes.
Right. Okay. And so before we get now into it proper, Dr. Omondi, when we look at exactly what you do then with climate services, just give us a little bit of insight into what the Weather and Climate Information Service does provide regionally in the country.
Thank you. My colleague has stated what we do, but I want to say that we are a specialized institution recognized by the World Meteorological Organization. This is the UN body that checks and balances on all weather issues globally. So we are accredited, and by the way, there are not too many. We are the only accredited regional climate center of excellence in Africa. We have ICPAC, that is in Niamey, that is serving the whole continent. So before you become a regional center of excellence accredited by the World Meteorological Organizations, you have to pass some standards. So we went through sometimes back in 2015, 2016, and we are one of the excellent centers.
Okay.
So coming back to the question that you asked, we know that weather and climate information services, for you to get an information for weather, you need data. Not many people can access data. You can have a data there, but it does not talk to you. So our work is to collect data or get data from member countries that we serve. We unpack that data. It's a lot of information. So you analyze it. After analyzing it, it will be able to speak to you, tell you what is expected in terms of weather. So that is what we call information. So that information that we get from the data that is has been collected for many, many years. The more years you have, the better, the more informative. So we use that one to inform the population, the communities, the people that are affected. And by the way, weather cuts across all sectors. So our work is to unpack this information, disseminate it or give it out to users in a manner that they can manipulate, they can use it and apply it.
Who are the users? Are we talking about governments, organizations? Who are the users?
Nearly, you are a user, government a user, agriculture, that my grandmother in the village is a user, the oceans, so across.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as we're getting into it now, we're getting into a September, October dry spell. It's coming. Or I could be saying my own things. What exactly is the situation right now and what are we headed for? Dr. Masilin.
Okay, so in the upcoming season, so talking of the whole region in general, what we see is that the Eastern Horn is likely to experience drier than usual conditions. So we are looking at southern Ethiopia, Somalia, also parts of Kenya, the northern and eastern parts of Kenya, and then we are also looking at Tanzania. So in these regions, we're expecting drier than usual conditions. And I think to also make matters worse, we are also expecting warmer than usual conditions over those areas. And then looking at the western parts of the region, what we're expecting is wetter than usual conditions. And then in general, we're also expecting warmer than usual conditions. Yes.
If I were to ask a layman's question, how do I differentiate between weather and climate? What is weather and what is climate?
Okay, so weather is what is happening now, and then climate is what you aggregate over a longer period of time.
Okay.
So,
It's cold, that's weather.
yes.
If I'm expecting it to be hot now, that's climate.
Not now, but over, like now we are saying the coming season, June, July, August, then you are now talking of climate. But if you are talking of weather, today, tomorrow, how does it look like?
Okay, now, which gets me to ask a question. How accurate is the data that you consume, and how accurate is the information that you put forth?
Okay, maybe I can help my colleague. How accurate? Okay, one thing that we must appreciate is that data is an issue. Even if I ask you data about your health, you say, oh, but why? So the same way, data
Why don't you ask me?
data is critical for us Africans. We value data.
Yeah.
So the little data that we have, before we tell the public about what the data is telling us, we have to perform what we call we check. We do quality, we check, and to some extent, when it is beyond a certain threshold, it is good enough for us to give it out. So to answer your question, it depends on where. We have a very sparse network of data,
Okay.
but with the little that we have, there are some scientific way that we use it
Okay.
to give them.
Allow me to get specific and be speak as a lay person. Okay, now, if I want to know where the wind is blowing, I lick my finger and put up my hand like that. Then if I feel cold, I know exactly where the wind is coming from.
Wow. Okay.
All right? My grandmother could feel her back itching, and she would tell me it is going to rain.
Exactly.
She had a scar on her back. She had several. These were incisions that in her time were indication that somebody had tried to heal her of something. And it would reach the point where we would actually be asked to scratch it for her. Okay? And oddly enough, it would rain. Oddly enough. Many of the occasions it would rain. Many occasions didn't rain on that day, but it rained later. What are the indicators that one uses? I'm asking this as a layperson because every time we hear of the weather, individuals telling us about the weather, and I like what you started, a southern tip of
Eastern Horn.
yes, and then we even make fun of
Northern
it.
is a part of
And then
Kenya.
it moves
Westerly winds that
the-
fly over the eastern
the southern
lowlands.
lowlands, and then we're thinking
The leeward.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
And we're
leeward.
thinking, right, very good. This information, how is it gathered in as simple a manner as possible? And what is it that we look at to give us the indication of what is going to happen? You see, what's happening today, I live in today, so I can see. But what concerns us usually is, like, when is the dry season beginning? When is it likely to really rain so that we can't control it? That sort of thing. Because it affects us enormously.
And even as your response, allow me to pick this, the words of Kofi Annan, because it's very interesting what he said about climate then. And I know you have also, spoken on it right now. And he said, on climate change, we often don't fully appreciate that it is a problem. We think it is a problem waiting to happen. These are the words of Kofi Annan on climate. Are we going a bit, wrong about what we're expecting as far as climate change and warning? Is it a problem we are anticipating to happen? We should actually look at it as a problem.
Okay, let me put facts here straight. Before I come to data, we need to understand because it has not come out clearly. We have what we call seasons. In our region, let me talk about Kenya. We have 3 seasons. When we talk about season for us, it is when we have rains, and when we from January, we start from March, April, and May. That is our first major rainfall season. Then second one, we have June, July, August. That is our second and dry, what we have gone through, and it's sometimes called in Nairobi. Then we have October, November, December. So as climate scientists, our focus is on those seasons. We want to tell the general public about what will happen in our coming seasons. That's why as a specialized center, we have to do 3 times in a year. The March, April, May, we do focus in February. Then we tell the end users.
Okay.
The June, July, August in May. Then October, November, December, we do in August that we finished yesterday. So when you asked a question before I come to data that it is cold, it is dry, this is our dry season and cold.
Okay.
So people are asking, well, how comes we used to get the Nairobi gets cold up to July, but now we are in August? That is true. It has spilled over. That is what we call extreme. And the extreme comes as a result of the climate that has changed. When it has changed, we have excess drought or flooding, excess low temperature like what we have witnessed now. Those are what we call the fingerprints of a climate. So we monitor them and we have that information. When I come to the data and the indicators, we have quite a number of indicators as we look at. Prediction is not just peeping through the window and you say, oh, it's going to rain. It is much, much more than that. We have at our center, we have a data bank that spans from 1961 to date. So you must do what we call, you look at how they behave through some indicators. We have the oceans, which are the center of water that gets into the atmosphere. Then that is what eventually comes down as rainfall when conditions are ripe. So we look at oceans, we look at the flow, the moving up of winds, we look at so many things, technical jargons that if you get into, you will even confuse the population. Okay. Indian Ocean Dipole, quasi-biennial oscillation. So at our center, we have more than 20 that you can look at before you check and say that it is going to cause weather to play in a certain way.
Okay.
So that monitoring is critical, and this we get from data, which is well prepared, post-process, and ready for forecasting.
Okay, so we've talked about information, we've talked about data, we know what weather and climate do, that interrelationship between the two. Now, we've also said that as we're going into the next couple of months, that things are likely to be drier, it's likely to be warmer. So then one would have to ask, combining this data and information that we have, Dr. Gudoshava, what or how do we use that information to plan for these next couple of months where it's going to be drier, where it's going to be warmer? Because on this side of the continent, when we hear those two words, we usually equate that then to drought that affected 23 counties in 2023 to the point whereby almost 12 million people were at risk of starvation. So how do we use that information to plan for the future?
So maybe let me just start. So we just had a regional climate outlook forum. So in this regional climate outlook forum, we had member states from the 11 countries. So what was happening during this time is we were coming up with advisories of what should we do in the coming seasons. So we had different people from the different ministries. So talking about the health sector, the agriculture, livestock, disaster risk management, and then we also had the peace and security. So some of these issues that we need to do were discussed in this forum. So like, how do we move forward in this season? What do we need to do for the agricultural sector? So there were advisories that people came up with. So for example, in those areas where we are expecting drier than usual conditions, people were discussing on issues of which type of crops can we plant which are more drought tolerant, and what are some of the actions that we can do in order to avert crisis for the disaster center. So talking about issues of what are some of the anticipatory actions that we can do so that we don't end up in food crisis.
Okay, that's very interesting, because we're also in the neck of the woods where maize is the be all and end all of everything when it comes to crop, and it's also one that requires quite some water to live, right? Or to grow, for you to be able to harvest it. So to have a conversation about alternative crops for growth in a drier period of time seems to me like a conversation that should have been had years ago, as opposed to 2 months to the thing, isn't it?
So maybe I can also go back a bit. Maybe part of the information is over the productive areas. We can see we are expecting wetter than usual conditions. But as you are also saying, issues on we should plant this, I think this is a conversation that started long back. People have been discussing this, and I think right now there are quite a number of varieties that are also drought resistant that have been produced so far. So I think it's a conversation that is continuing and will also keep continuing in light of climate change on how can we actually adapt to such conditions.
Perhaps if I would just shoot one question to Philip, because I liked his remarks when we began this conversation, speaking of his grandmother back at home, and those kind of people who are essentially the backbone of agriculture in the country. And speaking of food security, I mean, we have all these things essentially trickling down to education systems. Children hardly go to school if they're starved or if the very extreme weathers destroy classrooms, infrastructure. It is so distractive. And I like what you have said that ICPAC does to, of course, the centralized meetings with the stakeholders. But I'm more curious about the grandmother back at home. How does this information, reach them? They're not left out because they're the ones who need this information a little more, I believe. I could be wrong. But I'd like to know that it's not just the stakeholders worldwide that come sit down. Of course, I appreciate Kenya having sat with Africa in the summit last year. Yeah. But how about my grandmother? How about your grandmother? Do they really get this information in that clear structure? Is it effective this far? And have they gotten the warning anyway as we speak?
Quite profound and really good. Before I answer that, let me say one thing that we are climate scientists. So when you talk about, for example, the question of variety to plant in a dry area, we don't do that. We work with experts from those areas. So when it talks about agriculture, when we are releasing our focus, we sit in one room with the agriculture experts, health experts, security experts. So all these people, experts, sit with us. So our work is to unpack and help them understand how the situation is going to be climate-wise. Then they use their expertise now to respond. So we sit with agriculture, then they go do research and come up with the kind of variety that can thrive in a dry area.
And I'm very sorry to interject, but real quick, I mean, you do a very good job and you want to ensure that this job you do, you can see the fruits of it.
Yes.
So I'm sure you just don't sit back and say, well, we did our part. Like, of course, I think Elijah in the Bible or Ezekiel.
Yes.
And now it's up to you to use it.
Yeah.
But I think it would be nice to let us know in your evaluation.
Sure.
I mean, do you see that the stakeholders surely do good with this information? Are you satisfied, or do we need to call out some of the stakeholders as well to give enough support to ICPAC for the great vision they have?
That is correct. What we do for us to get who is it that is expert in agriculture, security, and we bring them, we pay for them to come and get the information. They are not sent by their institutions. That is good enough for us. And again, for us, as a regional entity, we have a mandate. But let me say that how do I reach my grandmother in the village? From data, you unpack, analyze, get information. Then from the information, you package it and disseminate. So like in the forum that we were in yesterday, being expert with us. And by the way, yesterday's forum resolved that we will be having farmers in the forum. And we talk to them in a language that they go back and do that. So the expert will sit and agree with the scientists what that would mean to a farmer in the village. So this is one agent for a farmer, for example. Agriculture expert goes back to agriculture ministry. They are field extension officers. And by the way, from regional level, the focus is downscaled to national. The Kenya Met will sit with the communities, will sit with agriculture at national level. They will unpack and zoom it to see at county, at district, and location level. So from there, then we expect that this information that started from the regional center has trickled to the national center. The national center taken, by the way, all the 47 county directors do attend the downscaling. Then these directors, when they go back to the county, they usually have meetings I think weekly, where the security people are there, the agriculture extension, health, they are also there. The same thing is repeated there. So we expect that this will cascade from national down to county and beyond the county level.
Okay. Dr. Gudoshava, as we come into the break, there was some, just sharing in terms of how experts and practitioners are sharing and using this information. Because isn't that the issue that we had? That there may be information and data that has been collected. It doesn't trickle down. We don't use it. We're not talking about drought-resistant crops that can be used. The information is not being shared. How then do we ensure that happens to ensure, again, that we don't see the kind of, suffering that happens because of a drier season?
So just adding on to what Dr. Philip talked about in terms of how that information trickles. So we also have different initiatives that we undertake. So we also have what is called participatory scenario planning. So this is where we take the climate information down to our local level. So we do this in collaboration with our member states, the NMHs, the National Meteorological and Hydrological Services, so like with KMD. So we go down to where people are. And now in this case, so like what you say, do they understand the information the way we have packaged it? Most likely not. So we try to kind of unpackage it in such a way that someone who is like our grandmother really understands what are we talking about. And the beauty of this one is we also integrate the indigenous knowledge in this focus when we are down on the ground level. So that's some of the things that we do. We also do specifically for agriculture what we call PICSA, which is Participatory Integrated Climate Services for Agriculture. So trying to also get it to the level that people who are on the ground also understand. And also maybe adding on something like what Kenya Meteorological Department has also done very well is what you call the barazas. I'm sure you've heard about barazas, where people are actually disseminating also the climate information. Like now is the start of the rainy season. People gather, they disseminate the information.
Talk about gathering data. Let me just ask again. You've mentioned it, but I'd like a little more clarification. What data actually do you collect from counties, respective departments, and so forth? What is this data that you collect from them, the one which you aggregate to now give you this overview?
Okay, so for us, we don't who gives us the data are the Met services. So like, for example, KMD. So they collect the data. So the data includes like rainfall data, temperature data. So they send it to us so that when we produce our forecast, we can also have this data to improve what the global models are giving us.
Okay, what do you use to collect this data? For instance, rainfall, I am of the view, and learned view, that there must be some technology you use for collecting rainfall all over the place so that you have an idea that this is the amount of rain we've had. And then that leads to the question of, okay, how accurate is that measure, and what sort of sample size do you need in order to be able to state with certainty that this information that we're giving you represents the truth or represents the reality?
Yeah. Let me say that we are a regional center.
Yes.
But we have an agreement, a protocol, why we established here that we work with the the Met services of all the 11 countries. So their work is to collect data. You know that Kenya has got quite a number of collection points.
Yes.
There are centers.
Centers.
Yes.
Even when I think when you're in primary, long time ago when things were still good, we had a rain gauge.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
We did.
I was going to say that.
Yeah.
We actually made it in the science class.
Yes.
Thank you for
So
reminding
that one
me.
is happening
Yes.
all over.
Yes.
So we work with them such a way that they send that data to our center. Because we have sophisticated computers, we have models, as you heard my colleague said. We get that data and bring the technology globally. You know, our center is connected globally with the advanced centers like UK, Japan. So with that, we have a very powerful computer in our center where this data is analyzed. But the collection is done at country level, our work is to post-process. You know, when you are given a data, before you use it for analysis, you must check the validity of that data. Of course, there are also gaps. Sometimes maybe an instrument broke down, it was not collected. So our work is to make it completely full so that we are able to analyze and get accurate information. So the collection of data is done by our agents. Then they also do the same at their level. Okay. But I want to say something that my colleague said. You know, sometimes there could be seen to be a conflict of interest. Our work mandate is regional.
All right.
But when she talks about peace participatory scenario planning, we as a regional center, we educate and capacity build our national counterparts so that they do the same to county and community. We are not supposed to leave IGAD regional body and go and work with the farm in the village. But we have people we work with that to do the same. So our work is to get funds, train, and we give them that to go to the ground. So many times, the issue that comes up is the response. Several people died because of flood. How comes that you did not tell us this? So our work as a center is early warning. There is what we call early warning and early action.
Right.
So the response is not our mandate, but we work with the governments and advise them so that they respond. So if you see some of these things that are happening, it is not that the people did not know. It was known, but the response was either slow or was not done at all. Otherwise, data that we use, before you use it, it is of quality. And when we talked about WMO, World Meteorological Organization, their work to ensure standards. And before we are accredited, they must have seen that the products that we give, the data space that we use is of quality. So I want to assure you that the credibility of data that we use is of importance and gives us information.
You mentioned barazas, where information is disseminated. Do you have forums where you also get feedback as to how worthwhile and useful the information that was disseminated was?
Yes, so definitely monitoring and evaluation is a very important part in any system. So we do get feedback. So most of the times we get feedback from the member states on how they actually used the forecast information that we gave them and what were the impacts. And then we also do disseminate surveys where we are asking, like, given this information, how did you use it? What are still some of the gaps that you want us to fill, and which areas do you want us to improve on? So even in the past 2 days, we did surveys to get feedback on what we are doing.
All right, I'm curious, and I like that you spoke to this before we took the break, because it's as simple as, I like how CT puts it, like layman's question. Or so what are the warning signs right now? What is the climatic trend right now until June? Like literally, the question would be, so which is the warning this morning?
Yeah, just as I said in the beginning, we give warning as per the season. Right now, we are in August. Our season that is almost ending was June, July, August. So we gave a forecast for this, which we have seen come to pass. We now see it is very cold, yet we are expecting that we should be having sun and warm temperatures. So as I said earlier, these are the extended anomalies. We say extreme events. So under normal circumstances, we have what we call the normal. But when it goes beyond the normal that is known, that is now when we talk about extreme. So the forecast for June, July, August, we gave in May. It has come to pass yesterday. We just issued one that is going to open in October, November, December. And that is exactly what my colleague had given us.
Okay, so what do we expect to see? What do we expect to see? Because if we look at what happened last year, 2023, and because it was a big deal that we saw that there was livestock that was lost. I mean, we're talking about in the thousands. We saw that people were on the verge. Were on the verge of starvation, and we had to see the place where there was government intervention and there was external partner intervention to see that then food was brought in to feed people, because the earth would then not be able to deliver in terms of food for people to eat. So what will we see in this instant? And can we say that the interventions that are already being put in place will guarantee that we will not have 23 million people at risk, that we will not have, or rather 12 million people at risk, or 23 counties at risk of, teetering on the precipice of this starvation again? Can we guarantee that?
So maybe just to take you back. So when we faced high food insecurity levels, so that was extended period of dry period. So we had a drought from 2020, October 2020, all the way to sometime in February 2023. So you can see that was quite a long period of time when people were not actually harvesting. But in this case, we are just getting into a start of maybe dry conditions. But as I was saying, people are working towards preventing these disasters. So I'm not sure if you have heard about Kenya just launched their roadmap for anticipatory action. So in this case, it's more of you're trying to prevent these disasters before they happen. Instead of responding to the disasters, you're trying to say, before this disaster happens, what can we do so that people don't suffer, so that we don't have the high food insecurity levels that we are having over the region.
Okay.
And if I
Maybe
just
to add, every forecast that is given is normally accompanied by response measures and contingency plans. So the people I talked of that attend the forum go back, work with the government, and also do a national contingency plan. So the contingency plan is where the government is supposed to know, oh, well, the drought is coming. It's going to be dry. Harvest is not going to be good. So they start prepositioning of food items so that people, when it gets to extreme, people get it. So where we then disconnect sometimes comes in is where the response comes in. Early warning is given, but somebody somewhere fails to respond positively. And then we are...
Okay. What should the response be when we hear that it's going to be dry? Between now and... What should the response be? Start gathering food? And how soon should this warning come in place? Because from what you said, from that question that CT asked, it's possible to be what's the word that you used? It's possible for you to be accurate in terms of what is going to happen some time in advance, right? So if we can deal with accuracy, then we should be able to respond with accuracy, right? So how long should I have? If you say to me in January that between June and August it's going to be dry, what should my response be?
Yeah, we expect governments who are custodian of the food reserves, who knows the population, the counties that are going to be affected, to know what to give. So it depends on how the government works. So we say it's going to be an extended dry spell.
Yes.
Harvest is going to be poor. They look at their store, the reserve. If they know that in a month, in a year, we consume this, and the drought is going to go for 6 months, it is up to them now as experts to plan properly. Can import, can get from other areas that had good harvest to the other countries that had a poor harvest. So all this, now we leave it to the national government to work on.
Well, we appreciate what you're doing. In fact, I really appreciate that. And what could be disheartening, at this point is, remember last time when we had floods and we had a dryers conversation to dry our maize, and there was, some sort of miscommunication on whether the floods are coming or not, and then whether the dryers were bought or not. I'm just adding to the, to the point that we expect action. And when Philip said somebody somewhere, is letting this whole system down, maybe we should call that someone in the room next time with ICPAC.
Oh, we will.
Yeah, so that they really understand that they're letting
That's
down
the
a
person.
whole visionary
Yeah.
organization.
But then
Plus a population.
But consider also there's something interesting here, because when we talk about climate change, the discussion here is about the center not holding, and what was normal is now no longer normal. Okay?
Yeah.
So this anomaly, when it becomes normal, see the problem again, those who are supposed to respond to these changes may not respond appropriately. That's why I asked the question, what happens after information is disseminated? Because human beings are what and who they are. They will do what they're used to doing. You will tell them, you will explain, they'll look and they'll say, okay, we've heard you, but this is how we normally do our things. Okay, and then disaster strikes, because it will strike.
Right.
And the question is, in the time you've disseminated information, have you come up with an understanding as to how often you need to pass on this information before it takes root? Because people don't change that easily. One disaster will not change them. They'll think, that was this time. Next time will be different.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a whole kind of a game changer. You have to change mindset, you know?
Yes.
When we give information, you know, as I said, our mandate, everybody has a mandate.
Right.
And people are very careful that you don't go into their mandates. So ours is early action. Once you've given early action, our work is to make sure that it goes down, trickle down to the village, as we had said. But before we give the next one, we do evaluation. We ask ourselves, with the information we gave, did it come as we gave it? So before we give any the second, the following focus, we must evaluate and tell people it was 80% accurate, 90% or 50%. Then after doing that, then we say, what is it that we did not do right? Particularly those who are now given the focus. What is it that you did well? What didn't you do well? And why did this disaster bring this number of lives, number of lives that were lost? So it is a game that we do by a number of people. It's not only us. So we have health, we have agriculture. So everybody has to say, what did you do? And what didn't you do right? So being a learning experience, people should learn that this was given, we never acted. Next time when it is given, we are supposed to act. So it is not a one man or a one institution mandate or so. We are working with quite a number of people, right from UN agencies, NGOs, private sectors, governments, and even communities. So you may do your part. Somebody may have not done his or her part well. The blame will be on them.
Dr. Masilin, how would you know if this coordination then was harmonized rather, that everybody doing their part? What would we see for us to know that, yes, information trickling down, data gathered, information collected, now being used in a proper manner, that the experts are, disseminating it, and that those who are the end users are picking it up, and then, what would we see and say, actually, this thing is working, it's working right?
So I think it goes to what he was asking, issues of uptake. How are people uptaking the climate information? So I think one of the issues that you'll see is people talking about it. So that's one of the things people normally talk about, the seasonal forecast. What did the seasonal forecast say? And some of the decisions that they actually did take based on what the seasonal forecast said. So you actually see, for us, like ICPAC, also, like you are saying, because we're a regional climate center, we also coordinate what is happening. It's mostly coordination of what happens. So in this coordination, we also get feedback from these member states. So what Philip was talking about, we work with representatives from the different ministries. So they also report back on what did they say and what did the people do, and what were the impacts afterwards. So, for example, what you were talking about last year when we issued the forecast for enhanced rainfall for October, November, December, there were efforts actually to clean up the drains and do a lot of effort so that the flooding impact is not too much. Yeah.
Did we harvest any water? Someone is in the comment section saying, even now, he is convinced we haven't learned as a country. Brings me to this question: how are we doing as a country? It's good to talk about the regional aspect, compare it with other countries. I mean, let's look at this. Every time we have indexes that we look at, perhaps if I could have a good morning, you'll tell me Kenya is doing well. We're responding well, Philip. The meteorological department is responsive. The people, the farmers, generally, rank Kenya in as far as response is concerned and preparedness to this point. 2024, I mean.
2024, March, April, May. Okay, Kenya is one of the most advanced country in terms of data and in terms of also services, climate informed services. So over the 11 countries, Tanzania is doing much better, Ethiopia, Kenya. So in terms of response, the same, because it also depends on the government's effort in response to the early action, early information that we give. So Kenya is doing well.
Right.
It's only that this issue of weather, climate, is everybody's business, but people don't want to act. They want things to be done to them.
Guy McPherson said, and this is just on a light note, if you really think that the environment is less important than the economy, try holding your breath while you count your money.
Good place to end on. And I think just important for us to continue to look into matters. It is important. There was too much suffering that happened in the last beat. It's important that we use warning systems like this to actually plan for the future. Thank you for being part of this conversation this morning. Dr. Philip Omondi is a project manager, Weather and Climate Information Services, and Dr. Masilin Gudoshava is a climate modelling expert with the IGAD regional body, ICPAC. Thank you very much for being part of Kenya's biggest conversation. Till the next time we talk, good morning.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.